editor at CoinDesk, and our great panelists. Give them a round of applause. Let's go. Nice.
Good afternoon. I'm going to ask the panelists to briefly introduce yourselves and briefly describe what you do, starting with Charles.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Charles Guillemet. I'm CTO. You can hear me?
Can you hear him?
Can you hear me?
Thumbs up.
Oh, OK, perfect. I'm CTO at Ledger. So my mission is basically to secure this blockchain revolution. And my background is around cryptography and security.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miller Whitehouse Levine. I work on DeFi policy issues at the DeFi Education Fund. Right now, primarily focused on explaining to policymakers what DeFi is.
And Lindsey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsey Grossman. I'm the business lead of Block's yet-to-be-named Bitcoin self-custody wallet. That includes a mobile app, companion hardware, and a set of recovery services.
Before we get started, a show of hands. How many people in the room have lost cryptocurrency due to a tragic boating accident? No one. Don't worry, we won't report you to the IRS. In all seriousness, no, the title of this panel is Why Self-Custody Matters More Than Ever. So I just want to start to level set the conversation. Why is self-custody important, and why, in particular, is it important at this moment in history? Start with Charles.
This one works. OK. Maybe another survey. Raise your hand if you own a Ledger device. OK, people know a little bit about self-custody. It's a good sign. I think Web3 revolution is a revolution of value. It's a revolution of ownership. It completely redefines the very notion of ownership. Internet revolution was about a revolution of information. It completely changed the way we access, we produce information, and we share information as well. In terms of adoption, for blockchain, we are in 1998 for the internet. So if you remember 1998,
Netscape Navigator.
That was the very beginning of internet. Netscape Navigator, modem doing weird noise. That was mostly static content. That was a very few non-www services like Napster and ICQ. So that was the very beginning. Internet completely changed the world, completely changed the way we access information and so on. And we are in 1998 for the blockchain revolution. So it's very difficult to predict how it will look like in 15 years from now. Very difficult. Nonetheless, there is something which is important to understand. This is a revolution of value, a revolution of ownership. When you own Bitcoin, what you need to understand is the following. The Bitcoin are on the blockchain. What you actually own is a private key. And this private key allows you to prove your ownership over your Bitcoin. When you want to send transaction to someone, you will sign a transaction proving that you own the private key. When you have Bitcoin on an exchange, you don't really own them. When you want to send Bitcoin from this exchange to anywhere, what you actually do is asking the permission to the exchange to send your Bitcoin, exactly as with your bank. And in our countries, we don't really care about that because most of the time, when you want to send your money, it works, most of the time. And when it comes to cryptocurrency, this is the same. Whenever you want to send your money from an exchange, you may have difficulty because either the exchange is locked by law enforcement, regulation, or maybe they simply lost your money because sometimes exchanges are hacked, or maybe they
More than sometimes, to be honest.
Yeah, sometimes. And maybe they gambled with your money and they simply lost your money, and they are in an insolvency situation. This was the case this summer with 3 euros and also with Celsius. So self-custody is important. This is the purpose of this revolution. Really owning your data, really owning your value, and that's why self-custody is very important.
Lindsey, talk about why Block is building a self-custody solution and why you think this is important for the consumers to have.
Yeah. we really believe in self-custody for two reasons. One is that we believe it's important for accessibility. Today, you might be happy maybe with the banking rails that you have in the country that you're in, but many people are not. Many people are not even able to get access to a bank account that works for them. And even when they do get access to a bank account, they're hit with hidden fees, rules about how they can move their money, and a set, try to send money across borders, good luck. That's a set of historical old financial rails that are domestic in every single country, and every time you move money across an international border in traditional finance, again, more fees, slow money movement. And so we really believe that Bitcoin, and when you use Bitcoin in a self-custody manner, it gives you greater access to people around the world to have more autonomy of their financial life. And that leads to the second reason why we think it's important. That's control. Even if you are able to get into traditional financial services or you store your coins on a custodial exchange, there's oftentimes limits of how much Bitcoin you can move, who you can send it to. And so we really believe that self-custody, really it puts the keys in your hand, literally the keys in your hand, to have more control about how you manage your money.
Though there are reasons why those limits exist. And why those limits also exist in the traditional financial system. Miller, when you're talking to policymakers, like what's the pitch that you make for this concept of control and the control that it gives the consumer in self-custody? Because the thinking of the legacy system seems to be that you don't want individuals to have that much control. So how do you explain that to a congressperson?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you're talking to. I think members of Congress are much more sympathetic with the idea that giving consumers and citizens more control over their financial lives is a good thing. I think generally, financial services in this country in particular are not super popular, a super popular industry, I think with good reason. And I think that members of Congress, rightly reflect the positions of their constituents, and many of whom think self-custody is an important right that should be protected. And I think, to Charles's point, without self-custody, I don't think crypto and DeFi is particularly revolutionary. The whole idea is that you could engage in digital financial transactions without having to rely on an intermediary. And that's novel, to your point. Prior to the creation of Bitcoin, the only way to conduct really a peer-to-peer transaction was in person using cash or a barter type exchange. And so I do think there is, particularly among financial regulators, an unease over the ability for consumers to engage in a wide variety of economic activities without intermediaries, because it is new digitally. I should add that caveat. So I think there's general unease as regulators are trying to figure out how they're going to go about accomplishing their policy objectives given that new paradigm. But I in particular think that policymakers, members of Congress, are supportive of the concept that giving citizens more autonomy and control over their financial lives is a good thing.
So we've established that this is an important goal, self-custody. How do we make it happen in the real world? How do you get consumers to learn how to take care of their own money? Start with Lindsey.
Yeah. Let me first ask a question. Has anyone here forgotten a password? Any password in their life? Raise their hand. Okay.
Oh, mine is called password 123. That way I always remember.
You found it.
Super secure. Let's ask another question. Let's say today, if you have Bitcoin and let's say you manage it today in a self-custody wallet, it could be a software wallet or a hardware wallet. Have you ever felt anxiety when it was time to make a transaction?
Oh yeah.
Raise your hand. This is not okay. So what we need to do to enable self-custody and to get more people to manage their money on their terms is we owe it to the world to build a better user experience. And this is why we got into the business here at Block. We looked at the options today. We saw self-custody was fraught with anxiety. It was hard to access. I didn't feel comfortable giving friends or family members a self-custody wallet today. And we wanted to build something that was forgiving of life. If you lose something, you drop a piece of hardware, or you forget a long list of passwords, you shouldn't lose your money. And so what we're building is a multi-signature wallet. It involves a mobile app, I have a prototype here, companion hardware. It's unlocked with a fingerprint or a PIN if you don't want to use a fingerprint. And this hardware enables you to go about your life. If you lose your phone or you get a new phone, you don't lose your money. The other value of this hardware is that it allows you to set limits and give you higher levels of security when you want to move your money. So you can tell into the app, hey, anything above, let's say, $200 equivalent of Bitcoin, I'd rather have that extra layer of protection with my money. And so we really want to lean into building seamless user experiences, but not just easy user experiences, ones that are also extremely secure. And so that's the power of investing in multi-sig and a number of other things that our team is doing. I think in addition to that, we also owe it to the world to speak in human terms. When I look at the tools out there, for someone who's new to this space, it can be really intimidating. Products that speak in memes or don't explain the difference of how these things work. And so at Block, we're really excited about reaching a new mainstream audience who's never managed their Bitcoin in a self-custody wallet before. And so we really need to speak to them in terms that they understand and bring them on the journey with us.
Charles, what's your strategy for helping consumers overcome that anxiety that Lindsey described?
Yes, definitely. As I mentioned before, owning Bitcoin, owning cryptocurrency is about managing a key. When I say this, it sounds simple, but it's not. I can say this because I'm a cryptographer for a long time. Managing keys is something difficult, and making it easy to use for users is even more difficult. So this is what we are trying to do, providing users with tools, allowing them to securely manage their keys, and also understand what they do when they are using their keys. Because when you sign a transaction, you consent for something. And sending a Bitcoin transaction is something simple. Most of wallets are using this properly. But when it comes to interacting with some complex smart contract on Ethereum blockchain, understanding what you are consenting to is something more difficult to apprehend, especially for newcomers. So one big challenge we have is to educate people. This is the first thing we need to do. This is a paradigm shift. With blockchain immutability, everything changes. When there is a wrong transaction, you cannot knock to your bank and say, oh, that was not me. Can you revert the transaction? No, this is not something possible. When you do something, there are some consequences. So that's why we need to educate users, allowing them to understand what they are doing, allowing them to understand what they are consenting to. And this is a difficult part. So we have a big UX challenge. So what we have built as of now at Ledger is the most secure solution in the ecosystem. We are securing almost 20% of the whole market cap. So we are very trusted in this area. Nonetheless, we still have a lot of UX challenge, and I think this revolution will be enabled by security, of course, but also by a good user experience. There are plenty of challenges to solve. Managing this backup with just 24 words is something difficult. This is a topic we are working on. Also, there's hexadecimal addresses are something difficult to apprehend. When my mother sees an hexadecimal addresses, she thinks there is an error. So this is not something we can maintain on the future. We need a solution for that. So education is key. Security is paramount. And then UX is the other challenge we have to tackle.
And I want to, go ahead.
Maybe I'd also jump in too. I don't think yet we've built for the other parts of life. Just on Monday night, I got an email. We've been building in the public, by the way. You can follow along at wallet.build. And so people write into us. We've been sharing updates on our development. And I got an email on Monday night from a 72-year-old man who said, hey, I'm really excited about what you're building. I believe that self-custody is the future, but I'm still really nervous about making that leap. And he says, as I'm preparing for what happens after I die, if I make a mistake with the self-custody wallets that are out there today, how do I tell my wife that with a click of a button, we went from comfortable to destitute? And it really broke our hearts. And we said, we have to build something. Whatever we build, we have to build a feature that also thinks about inheritance, that still allows you to control your coins and have full autonomy while you're here on this earth, but also enables a way for your loved ones, your friends and families that you choose, to inherit your Bitcoin when you die, and to do all of it in a true self-custody way, where Block never has access to moving your money without your involvement.
How much of that is a technical challenge, and how much of that, Lindsey, is a legal, contractual issue?
I think it's both. Look, when we're building out the back-end design, we're building out the UX, we want to make sure there's 3 keys in our system, one in the hardware app, one on the mobile app. You as the customer own 2 of those keys. And then the 3rd key is on Block's back-end. But in a 2 of 3 model, 2 keys are needed to move money. Block can never move your funds without you. So when we design our inheritance feature, we need to make sure that even when that transition of money happens, Block is never touching it. So there's lots of ways that you can do that in a multi-sig design, and we're really excited, and we're prototyping literally this week.
It sounds really interesting. Is there any sort of boilerplate legal language that you might provide to consumers that they could just put in their will, or maybe tweak with advice of their own counsel, but something to at least give them something to build on?
I mean, there's lots of different ways. There's even a book called, if you haven't read it, called like Managing Crypto Inheritance. There's lots of different ways to do it. I'm sure Charles has a view on how his customers have been doing it.
No, definitely. Inheritance is something difficult to apprehend. There are plenty of challenges. They are technical, but also legal. So ideally, you would like that your children do not have an access to your wallets while you're alive, but you want to be sure that they will get your money afterwards. Also, within a self-custody context, that means also you wouldn't like a third party to access to your wealth. So this is a complex thing. And also associated to self-custody, I think there is something important, like autonomy, for a user being able to, as a Ledger CTO, I want my users to be completely independent from Ledger. If tomorrow Ledger closes for any reason, I want my users to be completely autonomous and to be able to access to their wealth. So this kind of constraint is also something which makes this use case difficult.
Miller, I want to circle back to the regulators, because UX aside, I mean, I really get the impression that just the kind of the posture of the legacy financial regulators is a big impediment here. Can you talk about that? Particularly, I think the travel rule comes into play as well.
Yeah, so it comes back to the general unease over crypto broadly among financial regulators, which is that they are used to a system predicated on the existence and necessity of financial intermediaries that regulations can be applied to. And the travel rule is a financial regulation focused on preventing illicit activity that requires financial institutions, when a customer sends assets from one financial institution to another, to send the recipient financial institution identifying information about the transmittor, the person initiating the transaction. None of those regulations can apply in a peer-to-peer financial transaction, because there's no financial intermediary through which the government can implement the travel rule in this instance. So I think law enforcement in this instance has developed a new suite of tools, and I think with increasing skill. So for example, every law enforcement agency in the US uses blockchain analytics software to try and identify and establish attribution for financial activity on-chain, even if there's not a financial institution intermediating it. Obviously, public blockchains have pretty profound privacy implications, and we'll see how public blockchains incorporate privacy technology to ameliorate that concern. So I think it's going to be a process where perennially criminals and bad actors use new tools to try and do their illicit activities, and law enforcement's trying to keep up. So I think that's, in this instance, just another iteration of that age-old story. And law enforcement is using tools that they didn't exist 5 years ago to try and try and do that. But I think that, again, the political representatives in the US, and I think to a large extent in other countries, appreciate that individuals' right to self-custody of their own assets might supersede potentially financial regulators' desire to ensure every financial transaction is intermediated such that they're surveillable.
Charles, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think the travel rule completely makes sense when it comes to financial institutions, but when it comes to individuals, it's nonsense. We had this debate in Europe with MiCA first draft, where regulation wanted to...
Explain MiCA. MiCA, that's the EU regulation.
MiCA is an EU regulation around crypto, and in the first draft of MiCA, the idea was to create a link, a strong link between your address and your identity. So technically speaking, this is very complex to implement, first of all. But secondly, that means that we would create a database of on-chain addresses with identity of users. This is very dangerous because this kind of database will be hacked, and at some point, attackers will be able to know what is your wealth, how much money you have at home, in self-custody. So first of all, this is very dangerous. And in terms of freedom, this is a dystopia. Like we don't want our government to know real time what kind of transaction you are doing. This is not something we want. Privacy matters. Privacy is a matter of freedom. So this is something important. Blockchain are great objects, but currently the blockchain we know, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the most common blockchain do not embed privacy features. They are pseudonymous. So that means once the relationship between your address and your identity is done, it's forever. You cannot remove this link, and this is very dangerous. The good news is that on the long run, there exists technical solution to that, cryptographical solution to that. Mostly zero-knowledge proof kind of cryptography is a solution to that. With ZKP, you can make anonymous transactions which can be validated by the consensus. You can prove that you are 21 without revealing your identity. You can prove anything without revealing the data related to that. So I think on the long run, ZKP is the solution. But for now, blockchain are pseudonymous, and we don't want to create links between on-chain data and identity. This is something very dangerous, and regulation shouldn't go in that direction.
Yeah, maybe I would just chime in. I think it's really important for policymakers to have an open door to talk with those of us who work in the industry and make sure that these pieces, these proposals, this proposed legislation is not made overnight, because oftentimes the people who are writing the legislation don't necessarily understand what the privacy implications are. And so we really want to sit by side with the companies that are also in this space and go meet with policymakers and talk about what could outcomes-based policy look like rather than prescriptive on the how. And oftentimes, I think we all acknowledge that the speed of innovation is happening much faster than the lawmaking process as well. And so, I think I would like to really come to the table and talk about what is the outcome, and let's figure out a smart way to do it while also preserving privacy.
So we're almost out of time. I've got a question that's out of left field. None of the panelists have heard this. How do you measure success of self-custody? Like 5 years from now, is there a metric or some kind of sort of objective result that would be measurable that would tell you that this effort is working? Starting with Lindsey.
Yeah, I think the reason we got into this was to widen the pie of the number of people who are managing their Bitcoin in a self-custodial manner. We think it's incredible. It's an important point from a decentralization perspective, an important economic empowerment point, and to ensure access and control, as I mentioned before, we have to ensure that self-custody becomes something that is accessible and easy to use and safe and secure for more people. So it's about widening the pie of self-custody adoption.
Miller.
Yeah, I think the metric I would watch here is the volume of on-chain activity that's occurring on a peer-to-peer basis. Generally, intermediary wallets are known and identified, and so one could see how much activity on-chain is occurring via a financial institution like an exchange or something like that versus using a self-custodied wallets of any variety. So I think watching that ratio is the best way to figure out whether our objective of promoting self-custody is working.
And lastly, Charles.
Yeah, definitely number of users in self-custody is a good metric. Nonetheless, it's not that easy to measure. Also, the amount of money in exchanges is also a good metric. On exchanges,
which you want to go down. You'll want to go down.
It should lower down. When you use exchanges, that it should be only for trading. And for trading or on-ramp, off-ramp, it makes sense. But when it comes to storing your value, it does not make sense. And exchanges are agree with that. I'm not saying odd for them. So those are good metrics. So as a conclusion, I think like anyone should be his own bank, take control over his value, over his identity, and over the assets. This is the purpose of this Web3 revolution.
Them's fighting words. All right, thank you very much. Great conversation, but we got to put a bookmark in it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.